I left you with me having secured a place on the grad scheme at Goldman Sachs. Firstly, I had no idea of the size and pedigree of the firm when I got the offer and joined. I remember telling my mate from my school days that I'd got in, and he went, "Wow, my brother works there. This is a huge thing." I mean, I'd heard of banks like Merrill Lynch and JP Morgan before, but Goldman's was it's not really my radar. I was just relieved to get a job after my studies. But as I say, people were fascinated and amazed that I'd got in the first place, and it was all a bit surreal, if you will, because like I even remember, not long after I got the offer, that they couriered by bike the contract to me. Literally, a guy that looked like a pizza driver, the box on the back of a bike, came to my house and delivered the contract in an A4 cream envelope thing, and you're like, bloody hell, it's a bit surreal this. But in general terms, it kind of elevated my standing in like the golden child template thing, right? Like I'd done a degree, done a master's, now got a posh, job basically. Before we started, they sent us, they sent the graduate intake to an all expenses 2 weeks training time in New York, which was boss, I got to say. Like staying in a hotel right opposite Madison Square Garden, even catching a game, and also again meeting fellow graduates. Again, I'll hark back to my university days. Full of hope, full of excitement at what was about to come. We were all here at this big firm and enjoying our time together, and making friends quite quickly. But also taking in the scale of everything going on, right? Like they crammed a lot in those 2 weeks. It wasn't all just about learning all the training, all the technical bits and stuff. They made time to get everyone together in socials and give you free time to explore the city and have some downtime, that kind of stuff. When I got back to London, I started in my role a few weeks after finishing my dissertation, and I started off in a team of around 7 people who were really welcoming, really friendly, and kind of eased me in as to what to do. Not taking it easy, because it was clear straight away that, okay, there was a lot going on at once, and things are always on the move. So it wasn't like, right, to sit there and someone will come along in a minute. It's like take your time in familiarizing yourself with a lot of things first. There was a lot of training that you had to officially pass, because you need a level of proficiency and stuff like that. But the people were really nice. I heard from other grads that started that they weren't quite so lucky. They're kind of really thrown at the deep end in terms of like the intensity of the job, both in terms of working hours and just the sheer pressure and stress of what's going on. Not to say that what I wasn't doing wasn't intense or stressful. We had our moments, but it just felt that, like, okay, this seems more of an area that, okay, it's hard work, but there is time for someone to acclimatize to themselves, right? So basically, I just wanted to concentrate on doing a good job to the best of my abilities, right? As I said, other graduates were already doing like 12, 13-hour days, but I didn't really see that in my early days. I'd get into the office with everybody else around the 8:15 mark, and be leaving on an average at about 6:30. But look, being only half an hour train away from home made it a bit easier to take if I did have to work a little bit longer, which I said didn't really come up in those early days. Because I just kind of got lucky in terms of the role that I was allocated onto. And it was during these early years that I saw investment banking as a place where, as I said, there's always something to be doing. Trade management, breaks management, answering the phone, answering email, writing procedures, interacting with clients, interacting with the desk, interacting with other teams, all with certain market deadlines and cutoffs that are spread throughout the day. So, as I said, you'd always be working hard, always something to do, often intense, but there was always a sense that come the end of the day and all the reports have been filed and markets have closed, you've done what you can, and we essentially come back tomorrow. to do the same thing. In that regard, I met my needs, my core human needs of significance and ego, and control and certainty, which came from having a job, from kind of knowing what to do, and the sense that there was responsibility associated with the role, which gives me that significance, as well as the connection, the need for connection being met through a team that I got on with and had some really friendly people. So, to be honest, that was the case really for the following 4 years or so. I naturally made my way up through the team in terms of like seniority. I became an associate, as they call it in job title terms. So that's from analyst to associate in 2010. And, I quickly established myself as the kind of second in command in the team behind the management team, getting into grips with a lot of the facets of the team in terms of all the different functions that we carried out, and, understanding the wider hierarchy, operating under different managers, different styles. And look, the work continued to be intense. It needed a lot of organisation, skill, time, and people management and expertise to both get the job done and also create some breathing space, because constantly working at that pace, you could easily have been overwhelmed, and it was tough at times. But as I said, in that time we all did kind of try to craft that space for us, right, with despite all that we had going on. Because as I said, the atmosphere across teams remains like collaborative, and whilst sometimes we'd work some long hours, it didn't feel like we were giving our lives to this entire operation. But a few things became apparent outside of the day-to-day. There was a little bit of a myth surrounding Goldman's in particular, that a lot of people had been there for a good few years, a long time, and there seemed to be a real reluctance and almost kind of fear, if you will, of moving elsewhere. Because like I'd hear things like, I can't leave Goldman, I won't find it better elsewhere. And look, this was despite operating in an environment and a company that has one of its principles as zero mistakes. Now, that seemed like a bit of an oxymoron to me when I heard it, and it kept popping up in the following years at my time there, which I'll probably return back to later on in the story. But another thing that kept cropping up was the constant message from the beginning, if I'm honest, that there was like a pecking order between the trading desk and my teams in operations, and that because we served the desk and that they paid for us, in terms of the trading desk essentially have a budget to have an operations team work for them. So people took that message of like, okay, we serve them because they pay for us. So it felt like we were in essence subservient to them. Now I felt, you know what, fuck that. I'm not saying we're more important than the traders, but I wanted to work with that understanding that the two are symbiotic. A little bit like a football team and its manager. Both can be equally as important. But if you always say that it's the manager that's always correct, not quite sure that that's the right thing. It's also at this point that I'd seen enough to know, okay, I've got no ambition of becoming a trader or going into front office. That path had been tread by a couple of people that were on the trading desk that used to be in our operations team. But I looked at it and thought, you know what? It asks for too much energy and time, and it's an area and a role that I wouldn't have the passion or the intrigue for. Now, films, as I mentioned before, like The Wolf of Wall Street, do exaggerate things from a cinematic effect, right? But to be honest, what you largely see is true. Yeah, there is a lot of shouting going on, a lot of standing, finger pointing, a combination of being on the phone with a headset or a manual handset, shouting at someone at another desk across over there. A lot of sleeve rolling up for some reason. load of screens clumped together like some, big easier for me to say, CCTV system, and that kind of real buzz or hum of activity and intensity on the floor. And that really old school style of phones ringing, that really kind of electronic ring. Check out basically like a scene from Wolf of Wall Street or similar, and you'll see what I mean. And look, to be honest, some people thrive on that. They find that exciting, and that's for them. Fair play to them. Me, I could not be asked with any of it. I just couldn't see how you could get any work done, to be honest. And the times I would be down the desk, working, it always felt that there was someone ready to tap you on the shoulder or ask you to do this because you happen to be down there as one of the operations people. And it's like, right, I get it, but I can't be all hands to everybody, right? But anyway, that was the thing. I did also feel it was a double-faced environment as well. Because at the time, our team in operations was in a separate building to the traders and the trading floor. And through cajoling of management on both sides, we had that rota system. So, I just said I'd be down at the desk. That was basically part of like a rota system where we'd send someone from our desk down there to, work with the traders in the guise of like networking and building relationships and that kind of thing. So what I mean by double-faced is that when you were down there, they'd be all friendly and agreeable and okay. Now in the main, they were all right people. But when you were back in the operations building, then it felt like the tone would change over phone and email when you're no longer face to face with them. Now, granted, that might always be the case in such an environment, but this became more apparent over time, and you could see it started to fray on people who were juggling, multiple demands throughout the day. So that even when trying to take a lunch break, it felt like you were taking a liberty. You see, it's a bit like Hotel California by the Eagles, right? No one stops you from leaving or doing certain things. But then it'd be up to you to make sure that was caught up subliminally. No one was like watching the clock or watching this saying, oh, you were late there and you went out for lunch and you got to stay back for this. It was all unwritten. It'd be up to you to catch up, make sure everything got done. And if you did leave for lunch, just make sure that you either handed over or that nothing's going to fall over while you were away. So I subliminally, from old patterns, developed a sense of people-pleasing and validation of myself by engaging in practices like not taking a lunch break. Because I'd convinced myself that by the time lunchtime had rolled round, it'd be like 1 or 2 o'clock anyway. So given the way the day was structured, like the multiple cut-offs and deadlines going on. So I'd say to myself, wow, I'm only half an hour train away from home. I'll be home by 7, and then I can eat in peace. Which I realise now is fucking stupid and counterintuitive, and didn't serve me well in developing that kind of practice. So in those circumstances, my need went from certainty and control of the job before when I first started to the most important need now being that certainty and control still being there in terms of the relative security of the job, but now that uncertainty and variety that came with the job of like, okay, I don't know how each day is going to go, but there's a part of me that feels like, okay, I wasn't welcoming the variety. Believe me, I wasn't like, I want things to change and be exciting. No, fuck that. I want a day to be as nice and simple as possible. But in order to maintain that continuity, I employed those, dumb practices to keep going, essentially. So in 2011, I became manager of my team and essentially become that sort of manager and point of escalation to a team of 8 analysts and associates. I really liked my team. They were a strong, talented team, really nice people, and I wanted to see them all progress and see their talents and hard work get rewarded. And me and my fellow manager wanted to foster an environment of hard work and achievement without burning people out. And as previous iterations of the team we got on well with each other and became friends. And becoming manager also meant that I was privy to management level discussions, particularly when it came to big decisions like promotions, tech budget, resourcing, and bonuses. Now, regarding the first three of promotions, tech budget, and resourcing, it became clear that it would basically become a bit of a free-for-all between managers of teams in the division as to who out of everyone eligible would get a promotion amongst everybody, that was eligible for the position, was performing, which teams got the tech budget, and which teams got the biggest share of budget to hire temp staff for the busy season, which would be in the early summer / springtime. Because in all those capacities, there was only a certain number of slots available, a certain slice of the budget available, and everybody wanted to claim their larger share. But what struck me at that point was how shrouded everything got after a certain point. So see, like, all of us managers would have that initial discussion before it was like a select few who made the decisions, with little communication amongst everybody else until that final decision. So in the case of promotions, decisions were made with very little time for the people concerned to know, so that they could make a kind of final push. Because basically how it would usually work is that at the beginning of the calendar year, you sit down with all your team members and you agree that, what do they call it now? PDP, Personal Development Plan. Right. David Brent, heat your heart out. So you would start the year with that. You would agree the targets with someone. So if that were one of the targets was promotion to the next title, you would work out that, okay, you need to be on certain projects or initiatives, or have more exposure to this team, or be more in front of this manager, and all that kind of crap, to get them to exhibit their qualities that are going to make other people, in particular other management, support your case even more. So given these guys were people that wanted to make progress in their career in my team, they'd be on the case and take on the challenge of, okay, here's what I need to do to get promoted. I'm going to go at this with a lot of enthusiasm and hard work. And they'd always be asking, okay, what can I keep doing, to strengthen my case? They had that drive to succeed. But to be honest, I could only tell them so many times that, okay, just keep going as you are, keep doing these things, keep, progressing, keep delivering. Because in truth, even though that I felt that they more than deserved their promotion, and I would try and big their case up as much as I could with whomever I could, it wasn't just a case of just do the hard work and the rewards will come. Their case would go literally into the mixer and would be decided as to, well, the outcome would be by kind of a way of like a lottery, really. Luckily, as it happened, in the end, I managed to get all three members of my team that were viable for promotion up to the next level through to their next title, but it could have been oh so different. And in fact, that was acutely felt in this shrouded, mysterious world of bonuses, because these are really kind of like shrouded in mystery, because like there were always whisperings at the time of like how bonuses were calculated, how we all share one big pot, and whichever team made most mistakes in the year and cost the firm money and all that kind of crap, which by the way were called incidents. It's a bit like the police, they say, oh, there was an incident here. Every time someone, or some team or whatever, a mistake happened that lost the desk or, the division money, then it recorded like an incident report, and it would be like, whose fault was it and what measures are you going to do to solve it and all that kind of stuff. If your team made more mistakes, then essentially you'd get a smaller share of the pot, as per the whispers. But the kicker was that it felt like nobody felt that anyone ever knew for sure that was the case. So you saw a lot of people hanging on for February when their bonuses would be paid, despite them being finalised in December, which meant essentially they'd hang on over Christmas and New Year in the hope of getting a bonus to kickstart the year. Now that played total havoc with our resource planning, because a manager like me that was close to their staff knew that, right, if anyone in this random scheme of bonuses got a low bonus or indeed no bonus, the next day there was going to be a difficult conversation with a fucked off, pissed off employee, rightly so, who'd feel undervalued and ask for why, especially when they know what others got. And look, they would know, right? They always say, you know, don't share what you got with your bonus, but it's invariably shared. Now, some of you might think, oh, boo-hoo, you know, bankers not getting a bonus, bunch of moaning twats and bastards. Yeah, I get that. But what I will say is that nobody was on the huge salaries of a trading desk. You know, that's kind of known a bit. Maybe the senior management were, but I'm talking more people at, like, you know, middle management level, right? And look, we paid well, don't get me wrong. But before, you know, regulations changed in the light of Lehman Brothers collapsing in 2008, it felt like bonuses, and appreciate I was only there for a year before that happened, bonuses appeared more palpably generous than before. And it felt like it fitted as a reward and acted as a sense of reward for the work and hours that people were putting in. But now all of a sudden, the lack of bonus actually highlighted that after tax, which doesn't escape anybody, the energy, the work and effort that you'd all put in just didn't seem to be worth it. So this was my first seed of disillusionment for me. So that all of a sudden, that constant anxiety that I was developing around the work, the strain, the energy that I was putting in, did seem as rewarding in all capacities all of a sudden. And also realizing that the notion of hanging on for a bonus was fraught with risk. Because telling people they're not getting a bonus when it seemed like everybody else was fucking hard. And also been on the receiving end of that as well. And again, a few of you might be saying, well, tough shit. That's how it goes in business. Not everyone gets rewarded or gets given a bonus. And again, fair enough. I'm not going to disagree with that. And that's your experience. But to me, that goes against my own values of unity and everybody getting a share of, you know, the rewards. And indeed, that very conflict there, you know, sowed another seed of disillusionment for me. So moving on to the year 2014 was when those seeds of doubt sprouted in full, because that was one of the worst years I had as a professional. So to begin with, my role was kind of changed pretty much out the blue when I was seconded, not really asked, but more kind of gently encouraged to, shall we say, to one of our sister teams that was underperforming in the view of management to a massive extent. You know, tired, unhappy team members that seem to be constantly missing targets. All the work in the team of, again, similar size to mine, about 8-9 people, being concentrated to 2, 3, 4 people, and a real kind of difficult, toxic environment and attitude in the team. So senior management thought that, well, with my team performing really well, they could feel that I could step in and work some magic to get this team back up on its feet. I wasn't really keen on the role, but as I said, with that gentle encouragement, it didn't really feel I had a choice in the matter. So reluctantly, I turned my chair around, because the team were only just behind our team in terms of where they were sitting, to the other banker desks where this new team was, and almost immediately it felt like I had my work cut out. You know, basically there's a real sense of the team was just firefighting problems as and when they came up and as best they could. A couple of them were giving it all they got in terms of multiple, you know, touch points. I mentioned before the multiple cutoffs. You know, with it comes multiple markets and different ways of working, different people to, you know, get in touch with to get things done. So whilst there were a couple of people that were doing that, there were some others that were doing the bare minimum and not really be bothered by how the rest of the team was doing. As long as they got their little bit done, that'll do for them. And to be honest, there were others that would take the piss sometimes by leaving things either till the last minute and risk, all sorts of fines and penalties and things like that, as well as kind of sabotaging efforts. So, there'd be things like, without going too technical, it looks like they've fixed the solution, but they haven't. So it might be that they've, and this is all legal, by the way, not correct, but entirely legal, where, things would be hidden, if you will, in journals, ledgers. Essentially, as I said, not illegal, but just really, really bad practice, which you would it's just a no-no, basically. And furthermore, it'd be a real ball ache to untangle as to, okay, what have they actually done here? Added to this, there were no procedures in the team. So essentially, there was no standard or practice to work to, no manual for new people coming into the team as to what was the agreed practice and processes on how to do things and who to get in contact with and all this kind of thing. So how anyone joining the team was meant to know what to do would be anyone's guess, really. The training and shadowing that should be in the team and should have been the answer wasn't really there, because it was just reliant on the senior members that were doing everything, firefighting and trying to fix everything. They're the ones in the team that knew everything and would try and carve out time to train the new people, but would invariably either have no time or no energy, or they'd be doing the training and then something would pop up that would need their attention, they'd have to pause the training. All in all, just a tough environment to go into. Now, I joined the team at the time when another manager was also drafted in, who was greener than me in terms of experience in the team, because he was essentially roped in from a team in the division that wasn't really linked to mine in terms of what we did, but was close enough to remain in the ops division. So essentially, we were both trying to work out what to do with the team. But as I say, our plans were always disrupted by the constant firefighting that we had to get involved with on what seemed like a daily basis to avoid a penalty, a fine, a suspension, or clean up, ledger breaks or trade executions failing. Basically, a real, really more of an intense time. As I said, with a lack of organisation and structure, just constant firefighting. And at the same time, what's more, I hadn't actually left my old role in my previous team, because what happened basically is that I was still under my former team's headcount. So on the days that they were short of staff, where I know someone was ill and someone was on holiday, I'd go in and fill for the day because they'd be down on people. So my responsibilities were split over 2 teams. And I also had a senior manager who knew fuck all about the job. And to be honest, was more interested in asking for updates from people and getting on everybody's wick rather than getting stuck in and helping. Now, ultimately, all of that combined together, it just felt I did not enjoy my job anymore. And it took a health scare to make me see this in stark terms.